Hello and welcome to the International News Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Dunicic. Now, before we begin today, I want to remind all of you to like, comment, and subscribe at the end of this video. We want to build and grow our international community. Even if you disagree with me, comment what you think and let's have an open discussion on the events that are occurring today. Now, our main report is going to focus on the United Nations, or more specifically, a special meeting of the UN Security Council being called by the United States and its allies regarding the Russo-Ukrainian Crisis, or what would be more accurately stated as the Russo-Ukrainian NATO-US Crisis. Because the reality is while this crisis is occurring between Russia and Ukraine, technically, the reality is, and the two main combatants are geopolitical rivals, Russia and the United States. Now, the United States obviously is utilizing its geopolitical sphere of influence through the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And we covered what is going on over the Russo-Ukrainian crisis last week extensively. But just to give a brief, very quick refresher of the basic fundamental problem at hand that is causing massive tensions and many people to believe that a war could potentially erupt between Russia and Ukraine, and even Russia and the West, is that Russia has amassed over 100,000 troops near Ukraine's borders, with estimates ranging between 100 to 130,000 soldiers exactly. Now, following this, Russia made demands of the United States and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Only two, but two very key and crucial demands. Number one is that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the United States permanently ban entry into NATO for Ukraine, making it so that the nation can never join the organization. In addition to this, Russia has demanded that the United States and NATO allies remove all military assets and soldiers that are close to Russia's borders and within Eastern Europe. Now, the United States gave a formal response to these demands last week and said, "It ain't gonna happen, Vladimir." And we are back at square one. However, it is relatively good that this is occurring at a UN Security Council meeting. Now, the UN Security Council is essentially one of the highest levels of diplomacy in the world today. It is done by the United Nations, which is the successor organization to the League of Nations. The entire purpose of the UN, there's multiple purposes now, but the fundamental purpose of the UN is to ensure and maintain world peace. The UN is the world's largest intergovernmental organization. It has member states that are member states of different geopolitical organizations that are not necessarily allied with one another, and in many cases are complete rivals. For example, 3 member states of the permanent members of the UN Security Council are the United States, Russia, and China. 3 nations that constantly have conflicting geopolitical interests. Nonetheless, they make up the main body of the United Nations. It is historically a very good place to carry out diplomacy, peacekeeping, and ensure peace. Now, that being said, the UN is not perfect, and there have been countless accusations and criticisms of the United Nations regarding its reactions to genocides and war crimes that have occurred in different countries, including where I was born, Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I can fundamentally say that being born in Bosnia and Herzegovina, I do feel that the UN didn't do a really good job there. But that doesn't matter. Generally speaking, the UN has shown that it is more effective than other intergovernmental organizations at maintaining peace. Now, the United States has stated that its intention for bringing this to the UN Security Council is because Russia's actions are inherently threatening international stability and world peace, and that they would like to find a diplomatic solution through the UN Security Council or through any other measure possible to find a way to end this crisis. Now, Russia has stated that this meeting of the Security Council is essentially pointless, and that what the United States is doing is simply politicizing the issue and a massive public relations stunt. And that fundamentally could be true. Now, China, who is Russia's ally during this conflict, has stated that it would be willing to support Russia in completely blocking and preventing the Security Council from even having a meeting. Now, that is theoretically possible. It should be stated that Russia and China are permanent sitting members of the Security Council and as such have veto power. However, veto power does not allow any one nation to prevent the sitting or a meeting of the Security Council. For that to happen, there has to be a vote where 9 out of 15 member states of the Security Council vote to not have a meeting, which is funny. They have to actually meet to vote on not having a meeting. But nonetheless, that is what would need to happen. And as far as possibilities of that happening are concerned, it's relatively unlikely. The United States has much more support amongst the other member states of the Security Council, including the permanent member states and the non-permanent member states. And just to explain a key difference here. Now, the United Nations Security Council has 5 permanent member states. These member states will never be removed from the Security Council, and they sit on it permanently, as the name implies. More importantly, they have the power to veto anything. They don't need a vote. Just one veto from one permanent member state means that no formal resolution or action can be taken by the Security Council. Permanent member states include the United States, Russia, France, Great Britain, and China. Now, these 5 states, when they created the United Nations, were the Allied victors following World War II. That is why they are permanent member states. There are 10 other member states who have a right to vote but do not have a right to veto within the United Nations Security Council. These states are constantly rotating and being changed out. Their seat is not permanent and it is mandated, and the amount of power and influence that they have is actually significantly minimal compared to the permanent member state countries. So obviously, the UN and the UN Security Council is not an equal playing field for all parties. But in this specific case, where the conflict is between the United States and Russia, they are equal. The US, even though it does have more diplomatic sway with Western and European allies in the UN Security Council, is equal, as Russia can, just through one veto vote, shoot down any proposals, sanctions, or actions that are proposed to the UN Security Council. And if that fails for whatever reason, they have another permanent sitting member state, their ally, China, or at least temporary ally. But that is a whole nother story. China, who is able to shoot down any proposals. Now, as far as China is concerned, and that is a major global player, as well as an extremely relevant member state of the UN Security Council, has stated they believe that bringing this issue, the Russo-Ukrainian Crisis, or what I'm going to call it from now on, even though it's a little winded, the Russo-Ukraine United States-NATO crisis, to the UN Security Council is not necessary. And China did not do this in a sense to just be one-sided towards Russia. Their ambassador to the UN actually made a really good point. Both sides have demonstrated that they have a willingness to continue dialogue and to continue diplomacy, and that a sitting of the UN Security Council could potentially be helpful. But it could also just be putting fuel on an already raging fire, making this crisis so much more worse. Now, the reality is that Russia is actually probably right here. This seems to just be an attempt and stunt by the United States to gain more international support and popularity, to be able to leverage Russia in negotiations or to making further concessions regarding any potential alleviation, or let's call them peace talks, to solve this crisis. The reality is that the United States knows better than everyone else is that nothing constructive or productive can actually come from this UN Security Council meeting. At the very least, formally, no resolutions can be made and no actions can be made unless Russia votes to take these actions. And if any of these actions are against Russian interest, you better believe that they're going to vote those proposals down. And let's theoretically say that the UN Security Council moves to vote a sanction or some type of action or proposal against the United States. The US also has the ability to veto, and they will definitely shoot that shit down. So both parties fundamentally have the right to say, no, we don't agree with this. The only chance of formal action being taken is if the UN Security Council is actually able to come up with a diplomatic solution to this problem that is agreeable to both parties, which probably is not going to happen. Both parties are going into this sitting and this meeting with very negative thoughts. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing. At the very least, it is a demonstration that the United States and that Russia are willing to continue the highest level of diplomatic talks necessary to resolve this crisis. In addition to a sitting of the UN Security Council, tomorrow on Tuesday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken from the United States and Foreign Minister for Russia, Sergei Lavrov, have a phone meeting to discuss any potential future meetings and potential solutions to the problem. Both parties have vocally and verbally and publicly stated that they are willing to continue dialogues and find a diplomatic solution to this problem. Russia has repeatedly stated that it does not want to invade or start a war in Ukraine. Now, the United States has a fundamentally different belief. As we reported on last week, United States President Joe Biden gave a phone call to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and told him that a Russian invasion in February is a distinct possibility. Now, whether or not that's likely, only time will tell. We're almost in February. It's tomorrow. So we're going to find out if that's actually true. But the reality is that both sides do want to have some kind of diplomatic talks. And even other actors have expressed and shown that they are willing to try and resolve this situation. Very notable to state is the visit of British Prime Minister Boris Johnson tomorrow to Ukraine to meet with President Volodymyr Zelensky to find potential solutions for this Russo-Ukrainian crisis and the other separatist wars that have been occurring in eastern Ukraine. Following this meeting that Boris Johnson has on Tuesday with Volodymyr Zelensky, he's going to have a meeting with President Vladimir Putin, who he has stated that he's going to try to urge away from starting a war in Ukraine. Now, Boris Johnson has also stated that in case diplomatic talks don't work out, he is willing to send hundreds of British soldiers into the Baltic Sea area, which is neighboring Ukraine and very close to Russia. And Russia actually has an opening in the sea to the Baltic Sea. We'll show you in the map there. That he's willing to place hundreds of soldiers there, just in case diplomatic talks don't turn out well. And the United States is also taking this approach, hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. Now, the head of the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee, Senator Bob Menendez, today has prepared legislation that would introduce, and I quote Menendez himself, the mother of all sanctions against Russia in the event that it chooses to invade Ukraine. Now, from what can be seen of this legislation so far, proposals include heavy actions against the Russian banking system, with the main goal of completely collapsing it and destroying Russia's economy, while also providing the opportunity for the United States to provide Ukraine with lethal force and assets to use against Russia in the event of an invasion. Now, many Republicans in the Senate have stated that they want to introduce these sanctions, but preemptively, so even before Russia invades Ukraine. And Democrats are actually okay with the sanctions, but they only want to introduce them in the case that Russia does choose to invade Ukraine. And this is actually one of the rare moments where I have to side with the Democrats. Right now, the last thing that anyone needs is more provocations. Any kinds of sanctions or economic action against Russia that is unprovoked without an invasion or even attack against Ukraine's political, sovereign stability or integrity would just be a provocation and could make matters much, 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 much worse and make any form of war potentially unavoidable. Now, I do want to end this report on one last note. What the Ukrainians are saying. Ukrainian leadership is continuing to state that the situation is not as drastic, that there is no incoming invasion of Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky has stated that these tensions are not anything special or anything higher than what has occurred in the last, 8 years since Russia invaded or annexed Crimea. It is nothing more or less than anything that's happened before, and there's no special reason to believe that an invasion will come in. And as the Russian speaker for the Kremlin, the speaker for the Russian government has stated that the United States hysteria is causing hysteria to spread in Ukraine as well, to the point where some Ukrainians are even ready to go out on the front line and prepare to go to war with Russia when that's not actually happening. Now, that could actually be true. The reality is that Russia most likely is not planning an imminent invasion of Ukraine. However, there is an interest for President Volodymyr Zelensky to state that things are much calmer than they actually are. In the last few weeks, many businesses, foreign investors, and FDI, which is foreign direct investment, have pulled out or divested or removed their assets or people from Ukraine, significantly hurting its economy. Obviously, foreign actors, investors, companies, and private actors that are putting their money into a country want to make sure that that country is, one, not a shithole, which Ukraine is not, but two, not a war zone, which Ukraine is also not, but that could potentially change. So fundamentally, The talks of a potential war are already economically hurting Ukraine. So that just gives one more reason for a peaceful solution to be found. And once again, I do want to state that no one actually wants war here. War is always the last ditch effort. War isn't necessarily a bad thing. It is just another human expression or form or tool for achieving one's political gains, interests, or ensuring their national security. It does happen sometimes, okay? That's a fact. But every party has an interest of avoiding war. And it's actually a good thing that this is going to the UN Security Council, even if Russia and China are against it. It does show that all sides are willing to have a completely diplomatic talk and dialogue to resolve this situation. But let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments what you think about the UN Security Council. Do you think that a peaceful solution will be found soon to give concessions and to consolidate peace in and around Ukraine? Who do you think is at fault here? Whose side are you on, so to say? I don't believe in sides. I'm trying to look at this neutrally and from a realist perspective, but let me know what you think. Like, comment, dislike, subscribe to our channel, and grow our international community. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.